Good morning, everyone. It's so terrific to be at Grace Hopper with you all. I got in last night and I could feel the energy reverberating in Phoenix as I came in. I'm really thrilled to be here. Grace Hopper lived in an amazing century, but she didn't just inhabit her century. She was a force shaping it with technology. And that's what I want to talk with you all about today, is how do we shape our times with the technology that we work on and that we're so passionate about. Let me start by showing you a technology that is nascent today. Please meet Jan. She's sitting in the chair in the green collar there. Jan has been a quadriplegic for a number of years. She lives in the Pittsburgh area, and a few years ago she saw that the local university, the University of Pittsburgh, was looking for volunteers for a study. You'll see a couple of the researchers in the picture with her. This effort at the University of Pittsburgh is part of a DARPA program. It started a few years ago when one of our amazing program managers came back from the work he was doing in Iraq and Afghanistan. His name is Jeff Ling. He's an Army doctor. And in his service overseas, day after day, he saw the terrible injuries that our warfighters were sustaining. And he came back knowing that we had to find a better way to care for and to honor the sacrifice of our soldiers who lost limbs in the violence in those horrible situations. He came back saying there has to be something better than the simple hook that's the prosthetic that we've had for decades. He crafted a program called Revolutionizing prosthetics, and the first amazing thing that that program did was to build a mechanical arm with a number of degrees of freedom, very lightweight, self-contained, able to do amazing things compared to a simple hook. But that was only the beginning, because Jeff Ling, it turns out, is a neuroscientist. And so for Jeff, the really interesting question was, how could we have direct brain control of this sophisticated prosthetic arm? Could we achieve the kind of natural control that those of us who still have the use of our own limbs, that same kind of natural, graceful control? And in fact, that was the other branch of research in his program. And for a number of years, some amazing research was done in university labs to try to understand signaling from the motor cortex and to try to understand how those signals then translate into the instructions for moving limbs. All of that work culminated in the last few years in some very early human trials. And so when Jan saw the notice from the University of Pittsburgh a few years ago, they were looking for the first humans to try having this experimental procedure. And Jan decided that she was going to volunteer to do this. A genetic disorder had left her without the use of her limbs, but of course her motor cortex was still working just fine. And so Jan came into the university after some evaluations. She had a surgical procedure to place a couple of very small arrays on her left motor cortex. And the signals from those arrays are connected to a couple of posts on top of her head. And now you're going to see in this video what happens, what she's now able to do. Let's roll the video, please.
5 months after the surgery, we came back to see whether she would be able to control the robotic arm with nothing but her thoughts. They plugged her brain into the computer, and this is what we saw.
I can move it up and straight down and left and right and diagonally. I can close it and open it, and I can go forward and back.
That is just the most astounding thing I've ever seen. Can we shake hands?
Sure.
No, really?
Yeah.
Like, come right over here?
Yes, you come over there.
Okay.
Let me grasp your hand there. There we go.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
And I can do a fist bump if you'd like.
That's amazing. What are you doing, Jan? What's going on in your mind as you're moving this arm around? What are you thinking?
Okay, the best way to explain it is raise your arm.
Uh-huh.
Go. Now,
Right.
what did you think about when you did that?
Well, not very much. I do it all the time.
Exactly. It's automatic.
Is that hard work? Are you having to concentrate?
No, it was hard work getting there. I struggled greatly to go up and down at the beginning. Now up and down is so easy, I don't even think about it. Side to side, don't even think about it.
Just like
that.
your arms used to.
Yes.
Jan is an amazing person. In the work that she's been doing and that this research program has been doing, they have done two things. First, they have opened a door to move beyond rehabilitation to restoration of function. That's an amazing step. And beyond that, I think if we use our imaginations, we can also see another door, a further door. And that might be a door that allows us, if we choose to step through, to start thinking in completely different ways about how our brains interact with the rest of the world around us. I think we're at the beginning of something that could be extremely powerful. That's the business that we're in at DARPA. This is one of about 200 programs in my agency. What I'd like to do in my time with you today is to tell you our story at DARPA and to tell you about the things that we are working on today that we hope will be part of shaping the times that we live in. And I'll speak for a little while, but we'll have plenty of time for questions afterwards, and I'd love to hear from you as well. My agency is the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. We began in 1958 because of an event in 1957, and that event was Sputnik. Think about, we're at the height of the Cold War. It's the post-World War II era. We have robust research and development activities across the federal government and in private enterprise. In the Defense Department, in the business of national security, we knew from the Second World War how important research investments were and how important those core technologies were in turning the tide of that war. So in the post-war era, we had research activities, research and development work for the Army and the Navy and the Air Force and the Marine Corps. But then a decade later, Sputnik came along, and it was a tremendous surprise. It was the kind of surprise that we did not want to be subjected to again. And so DARPA was created out of a recognition that, yes, we have to have the focused service R&D efforts that go after and build the technologies that we already know we need, but we also need a place that lives outside and beyond those known requirements in order to prevent that kind of technological surprise. And that's why DARPA was stood up. Now, my predecessors quickly realized that the best way to prevent technological surprise is to create a few surprises of your own. And that's what we've been doing now. We're in our 6th decade of doing exactly that. And when I talk with my colleagues in the Defense Department and in the military services, they know DARPA as the place that showed that stealth aircraft were possible. They know us as the place that developed the underlying technologies to make precision guidance and navigation possible. In the old days, think about the Vietnam War, the question was, how many sorties did you have to fly to take out one target? Today we ask the question, how many targets can you take out on a single sortie? And we do it with such a reduction in collateral damage because of those precision capabilities. We've been part at DARPA of building the technologies that have changed the business of warfighting and the business of national security. I also had the privilege of spending 15 years in my professional life in Silicon Valley, and in the tech community, what I found is that people knew DARPA for a whole different set of reasons. They knew us, for those with a long memory, they knew us as having laid the foundation for material science as a discipline going back to the 50s and early 60s. They knew us, of course, for first and foremost and iconically for doing the early work, the ARPANET investment that led ultimately to the internet, the foundation for the internet and the web that we have today. They knew us for the contributions we had made across VLSI, semiconductor process technologies, MEMS technologies, RF semiconductors, artificial intelligence, many, many, many other areas. And the reason for those two views is very simple. We have always been in the business of breakthrough technologies for national security. So as you would expect, some of our work has always been about building specific military systems. But also throughout our history, we have known that the core enabling technologies, the material sciences, the vast array of information technologies, that those were fundamental to building the national security capabilities that we need for our country. And we now know from many decades of history that those investments actually also often spill over and provide the foundation for vast private investment that over time can build exciting new products, incredible companies, and whole industries. And that duality is something that you'll see in the work that we'll continue to do. Now, nothing I have told you about DARPA's great history was accomplished by my organization by itself. We're actually a very tiny organization. We're only a couple of hundred government employees. We're a small fraction of the nation's investment in R&D, but we are able to make those contributions because we're part of two ecosystems. One is the military R&D ecosystem that we work with very, very closely, and the other is the broader technology ecosystem. It's university researchers, it's people in companies large and small, companies who are in the defense business and others who are simply commercial companies. It's labs of all different types, government, not-for-profit, all different types of research entities. Within those two ecosystems, though, DARPA has a specific role, and that is, I think, really why we have been able to be a leader in participating in all of these revolutions, because our role is to make the pivotal early investments that change what's possible so that we can take these huge strides forward in capability. And that role is unchanged across now 56 years at DARPA. The world that we live in, though, is very, very different. And if you think about how much geopolitics has changed in 6 decades, if you think about how much technology has changed in 6 decades, today the environment that we live in is one where we face a very wide spectrum of national security threats. When I served at DARPA early in my career, from when I arrived in 1986, we were in the middle of the Cold War, which seemed as if it would last forever, and then amazingly ended before our eyes just a few years later. Today, we don't face just one big monolithic existential threat. Today, we are dealing, as you know, every day you can open the newspapers and see what we are dealing with, the chronic problems of national security as instability leads to violence and as extremism flares up in different parts of the world, as those activities are linked to terrorism and to criminal activity. Those networks become the chronic challenges to our nation's security. At the same time, we do worry as well about the acute things that could burst forth, and so we watch what other countries are doing as they pursue their own national interests, and as our economic role in the world shifts, as many other nations around the world, great news, as they advance, their standard of living is rising, their role in world affairs is growing, but of course that changes our national security environment as well. So it's a very complex national security environment. The technology world has changed as well. For many of us of my generation, we grew up in technology at a time when technology, many of the most exciting technologies began in the United States, blossomed here. Often we had many decades of lead or advantage over the rest of the world. And as you all know, in the work that we're all doing today, that's not the technology world that we live in today. Amazing advances are happening around the world. The capacity to commercialize and to use those technologies has grown and grown around the world. Tremendous advances for humanity and for people in every part of the world, but again, important implications for those of us who are responsible for keeping our country safe in the years ahead. And then, in addition to those external factors, geopolitics, technology changes, we're also living in an interesting time within the national security world because of the complexity of the systems that we're striving to build. If you think about advanced fighter aircraft, if you think about the complex satellites that we have to put on orbit today, these platforms have gotten so massive, so complex, so costly, so slow-moving, so inflexible that in a sense we're almost tripping over our own feet. And those are the aspects of the environment in which DARPA today is doing our job for the next generation. So the mission is unchanged, the world is different. Let me tell you what all of that means in terms of the programs that we're doing. And let me mention 3 areas. I'll start with the work that we're doing to fundamentally rethink complex military systems. This work is closest to the system side of the national security mission that we have, and our core approach is to think about areas like space, things like how we control the air, how we fight on the ground, how we build the electronic warfare systems that allow us to communicate and to use radar, but also to control the electromagnetic environment. How do we rethink how we build those systems so that we can have the kind of agility that we really need? Let me just give you one example, so I hope we'll get sort of the picture of where we're trying to go. Today, when you want to build an advanced space capability, that's an expensive undertaking to build a complex satellite, and then it can be, years before you're able to schedule launch. It's a very costly, tens of millions of dollars to boost this capability on orbit. What that means is that when we know we need new space capabilities, it can be years before we get them. The cost is prohibitive, and so there are things we simply don't do as a consequence. Well, guess what? The world has changed. Space has changed. In the last couple of decades, we've seen this huge surge of commercial capabilities on orbit. All of us, every time you watch satellite television, you're participating in that economy that is using these assets on orbit. Other nations are staking their own claims on orbit. It's a very different environment. But in fact, technology has also progressed, and this I think is the power of what we get to do, is we get to drive the technologies to a point where they change options. And so today, what you can do with a very small satellite, even just 100 pounds, is pretty remarkable with the miniaturization of all kinds of technologies, with the advanced algorithms and the software. And that means that today we can start thinking about completely changing that space paradigm. We're working, as one example, on a program that would allow us to launch small sats, 100-pound satellites, put them on low Earth orbit, for only about $1 million versus tens of millions of dollars more typically today. And even more interestingly, we're finding ways of doing that where we can launch those satellites from conventional military aircraft. That means we can schedule a launch in 24 hours rather than in 24 months. It means we can leave from any runway around the world. It completely changes our flexibility in space. Just one example of how we're rethinking complex military systems. A second area that is a major focus at DARPA today is about biology. And I just gave you one example of work that we're doing in neuroscience and neurotechnology. Here, the question we're asking starts with how do we restore function? But as we learn more and more about the amazing capabilities of the human brain, we also start seeing what's going to be possible in the future ahead of us. This is a revolution that is enabled by the technologies, our ability to image and to understand brain function, our ability now to tap into and to physically connect with the electrical activity of the brain directly, but also of our peripheral nervous system. And I think this is going to be a very promising area. I believe we're beginning a 50-year journey where every 5 to 10 years we'll see amazing advances that will reset our expectations. Other areas in biology today, the overarching theme here is about this marvelous collision between the biological sciences, physical science and engineering, and the information realm. And that is enabling neurotechnologies, but also new work in synthetic biology. Researchers have had this dream now, and in fact have done some amazing things to engineer microorganisms so that they can produce materials and new chemistries that we've never been able to have before. This is a moment when our investment in this area aims to unleash a set of tools and capabilities to start turning synthetic biology into a fast-paced engineering discipline. So we're building this design, build, test cycle that is so well known in other engineering disciplines. We're trying to bring that into the business of synthetic biology. And I think here the possibilities are very, very broad again. One of the areas where synthetic biology is making a huge difference is another focus in our biology work today, and that is the business of trying to outpace the spread of infectious disease. Ebola, of course, has caught everyone's attention today. It's a serious issue in West Africa, and of course now coming to other parts of the world, including our part of the world. But in fact, infectious disease is a major threat that people live with around the world. Millions die every year from various kinds of infectious diseases. And given the growth in human population, given global climate change that's driving mosquito populations north and bringing mosquito-borne diseases north, all the vectors tell us that, in fact, we're going to be dealing with these kinds of flare-ups of infectious disease over and over again. Our question at DARPA has been, how do we outpace that? And the answer that we're building today has two pieces. One is rapid, very specific diagnosis so that we know who has exactly which disease and how it is spreading. And then coupled with that, we need, again, rapid, specific therapies, both ways to prevent people getting those infections, but also ways to treat when that infection does happen. Today, that work is getting a trial run as we are leaping forth to try to bring some of those capabilities into the fray with Ebola. One example of the work we're doing here, if you've ever had a seasonal flu vaccine, you remember that when you get a vaccine, it can take many weeks before you really have the immunity, because it takes that long for your immune system to react to the vaccine and start making antibodies. One of our projects is finding a way to short-circuit that process by finding the human antibodies that protect against a disease like Ebola, finding out what the corresponding RNA code for that antibody is, and manufacturing that RNA much more rapidly than we can manufacture the antibodies themselves, which allows us to scale to millions of doses in weeks rather than tens of thousands in months, as we're currently able to do. But then also when we inject that RNA fragment into a patient, that allows that human body to start generating those antibodies very, very quickly, within hours rather than within weeks. So some huge game changers that we think are both technically starting to be possible, but also we think are going to be critical as the world tries to deal with the ongoing problems of infectious disease. So some stories about complex military systems. I hope I've given you a little bit of flavor about what we're doing in biology. Let me finish with a third area that is in the heartland of where all of you live and what this conference is all about, and that has to do with mastering this information explosion that is still going full bore. It's been underway for a few decades, and we can see many, many more decades ahead of us. Today, because of the work that all of you are engaged in and the revolutions that have come before, the VLSI revolution, our ability to build massive systems, to scale them across huge networks, the ability now to reach with information technology, no longer just sitting in some central facility, but reaching out to each of our personal lives, becoming embedded in the Internet of Things in every environment that we function in. We're now living in a world where information is growing massively, but also a world in which information is critical for everything that we do. I know I feel it in my personal life when we think about it in the context of what our military operators need to do. It's become integral as well to what they need, what they have to do to accomplish their missions. So one of our major questions in information technology at DARPA today is, how do we trust this information that we have become so completely reliant on? And in fact, as you all know, that's not a trivial question, because cybersecurity today is a major challenge. It's what I see is this trajectory of growing information networks, information capacity, information usage, and with that, a growing and expanding, a vast and expanding attack surface for bad actors of any sort, be they hackers who are messing around for whatever, for fun or for malicious purposes, all the way to organized activity trying to perpetrate crime through information systems, all the way to the actions of nation states. And in the private sector and in government, what we're doing today is running as fast as we can to try to patch and pray. Can we find a vulnerability and can we patch it and then hope that we're not going to get clobbered another way? That's exactly the right thing to do today. I think it's really all we have. The question we're asking at DARPA is, can we find some fundamental technology approaches that allow us to reset, that allow us to build tools and capabilities with the scope and the scale that goes faster than the explosion in information technology and the growth of the attack surface? I'll give you a couple of examples. One is work that we're doing recently to try to scale formal methods so that we could build embedded systems, for example, for the kinds of small OSs that you'll find in many of the devices in the Internet of Things. Our question was, could we use formal methods to build OSs of that complexity so that we could build systems that were provably, mathematically provably secure for the designed properties. A very challenging goal. We set out to do this a few years ago. We're making some great progress. A few weeks ago, we demonstrated what we believe is the world's most secure little UAV. It's a little quadcopter, but the OS for that device has been designed to be mathematically unhackable for certain security properties. And that's one of the ways that I think we can start knitting closed this vast attack surface. Another major new program at DARPA is something called Cyber Grand Challenge, and it's a program that recognizes that as attacks that are coming to our networks are moving at machine speed and are being generated by machines, human beings are simply not going to be able to keep up, because when a machine is generating attacks at machine speed and we are responding at the speed at which we can type, we know we've got a problem. The Cyber Grand Challenge aims to create a league of their own for machines to start fighting it out among themselves. And what we'll do is essentially create a capture the flag kind of competition that's only for automated systems. We'll have our first trials next June, and then a year from that, in June of 2016, we're going to be next door to Capture the Flag at DEF CON. We'll be having our own league for machines to fight it out. And my hope is that we will start seeing a growth in automated cyber defense capabilities, ultimately that will become tools that all of us can start to use, again, to get ahead of this explosion in information space and the vulnerabilities that come with it. So trusting the information systems that we use. The second part of the equation is how do we, instead of just drowning in all the information that we have, how do we start using that information to solve some big problems? And let me just give you one example out of that program. We have a new program called MEMEX. Often at DARPA, when a program manager has a great idea and they think that's going to change the world, they start by doing a little seedling effort to see if they can convince themselves that there's something here. In the case of this program, the seedling effort asks the question, can we build a way to do deep cores through the web, go into the deep web in specific domains, and start mapping the relationships among websites in a way that would give us insights that could lead to a way to look into criminal networks. We started working with a law enforcement group that was working on human trafficking. They happened to be working in the Dallas, Texas region, and so our project looked at Backpage ads in Dallas, which is a place where a lot of sex trade has now moved. And what we did was we simply looked at ads, extremely public information, but what we did was build a tool that allowed us to see the hidden linkages among those ads. So for example, a law enforcement investigator would be exploring that information space the way you or I explore the web. They'd be doing a Google or Bing search, and they would be sort of single-threaded going through this vast collection of websites, and they would be trying to find patterns. What our tool did was figure out how all those websites were linked to each other. So for example, certain phone numbers showed up over and over again on multiple websites. And we built cluster maps where you could see which of those phone numbers or links seemed to be repeated. All we knew was that they showed up frequently. We didn't really know what else was going on. We built a list of 600 phone numbers from our work, from public sources. We threw it over the fence to our law enforcement partners, And they compared those 600 numbers against their arduously built database, from conventional law enforcement means, a database built up over an extended period of time. And to our mutual surprise, they found that over 400 of our phone numbers related directly back to known criminal offenses. That was pretty interesting. That's when they started getting interested. And then they found that 30 of those phone numbers tracked back to fund transfers in the regions surrounding North Korea. And so now we have given them a tool that allows them to focus their work and start looking at what they believe might end up being some important human trafficking networks that are moving young girls out of North Korea and bringing them into this country for really, I think, the most appalling thing that is happening in our society today. Very, very powerful tools because of our ability to scale and start looking into this information realm, a place that is, we all know how vast and wonderful and powerful the web is. We all use it for great things every day. It is also a place where bad activity hides because of its vastness. We're starting to have ways to keep up with that and to look and to see and then to take action when we see that. So I hope I've given you some great examples this morning about work that we are doing to shape the times that we live in with powerful technologies. DARPA's work continues to focus on breakthroughs for national security, but as you've seen, I hope, in the examples I've given you, I think it's a fair expectation that the investments we're making today are also, many of them are going to find much wider applicability. And my aspiration is that for those of us who have the privilege of serving at DARPA today, when we look back in the years and the decades ahead, I hope we're able to look back and take that same kind of pride in our investments today that we have in what our predecessors did because of the power of these technologies to shape our society. So I want to thank you so much for the time with you today and the opportunity to share what we're doing at DARPA. I would love to hear your questions. If you want to come on up to the microphones, love to have a little discussion with you. Thank you very much.
Hi.
Hi. Let's start over here at number 2.
Hi. My name's Savannah Horn. I'm currently a first-year grad student at Worcester Polytechnic Institute, or WPI, and they are working on like the DARPA robotics competition, and we'll be competing in the final, so yay. But for someone like me, my study is robotics engineering. How would a grad student get involved with DARPA?
Yeah, usually for graduate students, it happens through the work that we're funding at the university. When I was a graduate student, I happened to work on a project that DARPA was funding, and that's usually the link. An example is exactly the project that you mentioned. This is another challenge that's running right now, the DARPA Robotics Challenge. Just to say a quick word about that, this is a challenge designed it was inspired by Fukushima, as I'm sure you know. The question was, why can't robots function in a harsh, hostile environment like the one in the post-Fukushima disaster? And so the challenge is can we build robots? Can robots learn how to climb ladders and turn valves and hook a hose up? Turns out to be incredibly hard for robots to do. In the course of doing that challenge, we've had a number of universities, and because of those projects, a number of students have gotten to participate. I think that's wonderful. It injects a kind of energy into our projects that we really need. I hope for those students it's a way to see what we do and that it'll become part of what they do. And I hope they'll be part of our community as they go forward. But whether or not you're participating in that work today, if you end up doing research in the areas where DARPA is focused, I hope you'll find a way to participate. Send us a proposal when you see something we're doing that you care about.
Thank you.
Please, right over here.
Hi, my name is Shiri Doria-Cohen. I'm from UMass, a PhD student. So first of all, thank you so much for coming to speak with us.
It's
We really
great to be
appreciate
here.
it. And really inspired, especially by the video that you showed of how we can actually use computing to help people and actually improve their lives in meaningful ways. Given that, I want to ask you, I'm half Israeli, half American, and I was flabbergasted by your comment about moving war to robots. So why is moving war?
What did I say? Exactly?
No, but you were saying capture the flag, robotic
yeah.
defense.
Yeah.
So I'm really confused.
Absolutely.
Why is it better to fight with robots instead of just stop fighting?
Yeah, I'm all for it. I think that's exactly right. It turns out not everyone on a planet of 7 billion people feels that way, and our job, others have other roles in the community, but my job at the moment is to make sure that our nation is able to meet our national security interests and needs. Now, the specific answer about robots, I hope I was clear that in the Cyber Grand Challenge, the problem there is that the way that attacks on our cyber infrastructure are moving to automation, and the human beings are simply not going to be able to keep up with it. You can't throw enough people at that problem to keep up with the pace at which attacks come. And that's an environment where I think automation is going to be important simply because of the response time and the scale. So speed and scale will be the reasons. The other reasons that we use automated systems or robotic systems in the military context is to protect our soldiers' lives. And I think that I think it's also, maybe I should just take a minute and be really clear. What you see in Hollywood movies is Hollywood. What we're trying to do is build fact and distinguish it from science fiction. The DARPA Robotics Challenge we were just talking about was a great exercise in recalibrating us about what robots can actually do today, especially in the complex ground environment. One of the highlights I had at the DARPA Robotics Challenge last year was watching a robot, lumber up to a ladder that it was supposed to climb and then spend 6 minutes looking at the ladder, because that's where we are. And we're going to get much, much better. But all of that is motivated by our desire to make sure that we can do what we need to do and keep our people out of harm's way.
Absolutely. And I just want to mention, the reason I bring this up is I think that as women, perhaps we're uniquely posed to say, hey, let's just stop for a minute and think, instead of figuring out better ways to fight, let's just sit down with the other side and see what can we do to stop the fighting. So thank you so much for listening.
I think you're absolutely right.
Thank you.
Do we have someone else over here? Yes, please.
Yes, ma'am. Good morning. I'm Hannah Lee from Jacksonville University, and I'm currently in the Naval ROTC program. What are the chances of an officer in the Navy getting a position at DARPA? I'm very interested in research and development at DARPA, and watching and listening to your presentation has only solidified that for me.
Awesome. Some future DARPA director is going to be really happy I came here, I can tell. So the answer to your question, let me just say a few words about DARPA and then the military folks specifically. DARPA is a small agency. We're a total of about 200 government employees. Half of that cadre are the support people who make the whole engine run. The other half are our technical staff. And all of the technical staff, from me through the program managers, come in for typically a 3 to 5 year tour. That's by design. Our mission requires us to work on things that are next. We don't have the mission of working forever in any particular area. And part of how we keep fresh is to hire new people on this continuing sort of frantic tumble to keep fresh blood coming in the door. So within DARPA, about 90 to 100 people at any moment in time are the program managers, the technical core of the agency, who have the responsibility to craft and execute these amazing programs. Of that group, typically about 8 or 10% are military officers from across the services. But what I care about, number one, is for those program managers, I am looking for a few really unusual souls. They are people who are first and foremost driven to make a difference and change the world. They are hardcore technologists who really understand their field. but they also have dynamic range. They can go from atoms and bits all the way up to what the widget or device or system looks like, all the way up to why it changes military capability, national security, how it changes everything, right? And the ability to navigate up and down. They have to be people who know how to make big things happen. Dreamers are great, but dreamers who can do is really what we're looking for. And by the way, if any of you know people like that, I need to know about them. So please let me know. DARPA, with our turnover, we're typically looking for about 30 people like that every single year. It's not a huge number, but I'm looking for them wherever they come from, active duty military, other parts of DOD, universities, companies, whatever their backgrounds are.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes,
Hi.
good morning. My name is Mary Curtin, and I work for the Department of State, and I'm in the New York Passport Office. We do a lot of work to prevent fraud, and I wanted to know if you could tell us about how what you look for in terms of executive leadership and success on the federal context.
Yeah, you know, to me, the federal context, at DARPA, what I care about is, like any leading technology organization, I am looking for the people who can get our mission done. It's really the list that I mentioned a minute ago. Deep, hardcore technologists, able to make a difference, a drive to change the world. I need those characteristics because I need people who are running in the door every day. And I'm very fortunate that we've been able to create the environment that attracts and energizes those kinds of people. We're going to make this the last one because I think we're running out of time.
Good morning, ma'am. I'm a software engineer at Yahoo. You're hugely inspiring. Thank you. One question. Do political interests and bureaucracies frustrate you when you want to do a project and you're not able to? And if you face such problems, how have you overcome those?
We are so fortunate at DARPA to get the room to do the work that we need to do. So I would tell you that those are not problems for us. The support that we have in the department, in the White House, on Capitol Hill, Republicans and Democrats, we get the room to do exactly what we need to do. Now, that's not to say I have never encountered those problems because the world is what the world is. You know, for my organization, what I work on every single day is to make it a place where people can get their work done. And I think that's actually one of our most important jobs as managers and leaders. So part of the reason I came back to DARPA was I knew that it had that culture and that support and that capability. I think it's a precious resource and something that has to be nurtured everywhere. Thank you all so much. It's great to be with you today.